Okay, go.
So
Historic-
Orchestry is so good that we had that client where we were doing it with PowerShell, and they leveled up, and somebody said, instead of doing PowerShell, should we do Orchestry instead? And I couldn't even in good conscience make the argument for PowerShell.
All right, everybody, here we are, February 7th episode of Ask and Praxis. Gang's all here, and so let us jump right into it. Today's topic, we are continuing our long journey on templating in Microsoft 365. Today's subtopic then is site and list templates. And so we're going to recap what a template is as we have been doing, and then we're going to talk about specifically what your options are around doing templating for sites and templating for lists and libraries, which I think if you use the SharePoint platform in general, that concept or needing to do that makes some sense. We'll wrap up with some automation scenarios for our developer and admin crew. And so with that, Mark Anderson is here. He's ready to go. Tell us about templates.
What is a template? We've been talking about templates for quite a few weeks now. We keep repeating this because it's a different recording. So usually a template is something that, sort of is a representation of something that you want to reproduce. So a pattern or a mold, something that we use in carpentry or metalworking, in mechanical work. So it's usually not worth having a template unless you need a bunch of different things that are very much the same. If you're making two of something, you probably don't use the first one as a template for the second one. Can be very useful in many different ways, but when it comes to SharePoint, Julie, click.
I'm clicking.
It provides repeatability, consistency. It can be a way to encapsulate institutional knowledge. So for example, if you do projects a certain way and you want to store your documents a certain way in that project site, and you learn some things over the course of the many projects that you do, and you realize, well, we should change that template so that it makes sure that we capture our learnings at the end, then you're actually starting to evolve those templates based on what you learned about how to run projects. So templates in this sense are a starting point. They're not applied after. Usually you don't apply them after you start creating content and actually using the thing, but they can be applied if you're, for example, have a template for stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So they can actually help you support the evolution of a process. And then the other point that's important to make is that there's no connection back to the template. So if you change the original template, it doesn't mean that everything that was created from it changes. It means that anything new would then change. If you need to retrofit things, then that's a different task.
Cool. Thank you for recapping for us. One of the things we hadn't done thus far in our templating journey is talk about the maturity model and how it fits into templating. And I think it does fit in really nicely when we've started discussing this early in the week in preparation. We feel like it fits really nicely into site and list templates specifically. So Mark, Patrick, what are some of our thoughts about the maturity model as it applies to those?
Where is Mark Patrick? I hate the way Teams doesn't show everybody now. I'll start because I was talking. So at level 100, which is not all that uncommon, there are no templates at all. Everybody just sets things up. They might create new sites or lists and just manually configure them on the fly. In fact, in a sense, you're using the documents library as the only template that you really have, which just captures documents, and that's it. Patrick?
I was just going to
put you on the spot.
That's fine. Which one? There's many of them. No, I mean, I think this is where part of this discussion came in the other day when we were talking about it, which is around the new site templates that Microsoft has rolled out. when creating a new site, whether it's a team or communication site, you now have a nifty feature of choosing new templates. I think for new startups or organizations that are just kind of getting their feet wet, it's a good opportunity to start rolling out some of those consistencies that these templates can provide, as well as providing some basic design to them.
Yeah, 100%.
That being said, there's not a lot of IA involved. In fact, there's none at all. So certainly it is not something that we want to kind of push for organizations that are looking to mature. But for those that are just kind of getting started, those initial new templates we'll be talking about in a few minutes will be a great way to start.
Yeah, it's sort of unfortunate that Microsoft's templates sort of sit at that 200 level, in that they don't provide any repeatable information architecture that you can take advantage of across the different sites you create using them, or the different lists you create using them.
Yep.
So at level 300, you're starting to build your own site and list templates that represent your organization's needs, you know, the way you run projects, the way you store content in lists, and you're starting to build that on top of the enterprise IA. And when we say enterprise information architecture, we really mean using, setting things up in the SharePoint Admin Center, content types, site columns, things like that, so that you're starting to bring consistency with those templates that otherwise would not be there across different sites and lists.
And I would say, as the guy that normally talks about PowerShell, this is kind of somewhere where the PowerShell stuff would fit in. It's level 299 maybe, but same kind of idea. You've got an idea what you want to do. You've given it some IA.
298.5 maybe.
We're striving for
0.5.
299. So I'm working at it. We'll get it over the hump.
Lots of times people will build those templates and then say, okay, well, we're done. We got a template. We're never going to look at that again. And I think at level 400, you're always reevaluating those templates and thinking about, well, what's changed about the way we do our work, and what should the next instantiation of this template look like?
Yep. And lastly, of course, is the automation sort of area where you have built your own custom way to sort of manage your templates, apply your templates, use your templates. That could be using third-party products. We'll talk about some of those later, but it could be writing your own sort of custom platform for managing your templates. So that's another aspect of this. All right, let's move on to out-of-the-box site templates.
So this is kind of getting at what I was just talking about with those initial designs and templates that Microsoft has rolled out for us. Of course, for new organizations, these are kind of the first ones they see. They kind of got rid of the standard or the basic and hid them below the fold, as we say. So you have to scroll to find your blank document template if you're creating your own. But certainly for those organizations that are just kind of starting out, that are on a little bit more of the simple or basic level, choosing one of these is a great start for those organizations.
One of our beefs with these, one of our beefs with these templates, and I just realized we haven't put our beef in these slides anywhere. Each of these templates then gives you a uniquely named homepage for the site. To an end user, they'll never notice the difference. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the URL. You're still going to the homepage of the site. But for example, the out-of-the-box the standard team template gives you, instead of the homepage being home.aspx, it's collabhome.aspx. So for somebody who's building automation or looking for specific pages to be in specific places, you may have some rethinking to do here. There's a blog
you're just
post
going to have
to
to jump through some more hoops to look what the homepage is for the site and do it that way.
Right.
Well,
and they've changed the names of those over time too. Sorry.
Yeah, to make it to make it even more confusing is when you do that, you actually end up with two. You just still have home.aspx, but then you have your special home. So if people aren't aware of that, it can certainly be confusing as you've built out a page and then you hit your home and all of a sudden go, wait,
right.
Where is it? I did this work.
Yeah. Another thing. So yes, that's happened to me a couple of times. And you can set any page your home, so you can go into that pages library and see which one's the home page. Or with PowerShell, you can do it. With PowerShell, though, it's a property of the page, the list item, not the site or the library. So you can't just go to the library or the site and say, what's the home page? I think you need to walk through the pages and see which one has the default property or something. But it'd be done that way too.
As somebody who's been telling people never to rename the homepage for years, that sort of offends me. So that's why I got on my high horse about it.
Yep.
So site templates for information architecture. Site templates used to be called site designs, and I sort of like that name better. But I tend to use site templates more as components by which to instantiate certain chunks of information architecture. So rather than thinking of them as, I'm going to apply this site template and it's going to create the beautiful site that I want, which is what the Microsoft templates pretend to do, I'm going to use them to maybe apply several different site templates to the same site in order to get some consistently configured lists and libraries or content types and site columns, that sort of stuff. So when you create your own site templates, and Todd's going to talk about how that works with PowerShell, you can do a lot of things that you would want to do when you were, if you did have a one pager and you were saying, okay, instead of doing this with technology, we're just going to follow this recipe and make this site. The one thing that you can't do is configure that homepage, which is probably one of the first things that people want to do when they think of a template. And that's because there is, surprisingly, no Pages API.
Eventually.
Never.
All right.
So some examples. We had an Ask and Praxis a few months back, a while back. I don't know where I found it, but where we create a policy center, and it's something we talk about with clients all the time. If you have each department manages their own policies, you might have a library called the policies library, and you want to have a content type enabled in it. You want to have certain site columns available, all that sort of stuff. Well, by creating a site template called create policies library, like at the bottom there, you can just create that library and make sure it's wired up correctly. And it can be wired up to just have its own uniquely GUIDed content type called policy, or you can connect to the content type gallery in the SharePoint Admin Center / content type hub, which would be a better practice. So in this case, we've got two separate site templates from our organization, and we could apply them independently to sites where we either wanted an org tools list or a policies library or both. In a sense, it's information architecture as a service.
Casper makes the point that he has never been able to see why he would use a template when a PnP provisioning exists. And I think it's a maturity thing partially, but it's also a skills thing, right? Like there's some organizations without those able to implement PnP provisioning. And so,
Well, the nice thing about site templates is a site owner can click that button.
Right.
PnP provisioning, you got to have somebody writing who can run PowerShell. I've tried to do that with clients. I've said, just fire up PowerShell and run this script. There's a lot of sort of preliminary stuff you've got to do to make that happen. So it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think that can be a high bar for a content owner that wants to spin up a templated site to run PowerShell, get it installed.
And as Glenna points out, it can be a permissions thing. You don't, depending on the size of your organization, you may not be able to run PowerShell against certain things. So, it depends. Of course, it depends what it is.
Of course, it depends.
But yeah. All right, let's move to Todd's slide. See, I let him have a slide before the end.
Yeah,
Isn't that
and
nice of me?
Before the
I
end,
made
yeah.
her put
I
it in the
think-
middle
Oh.
so I wouldn't get.
I
get
think
Did
I
you fit everything
offered.
on there, Todd?
Yeah. So what was that? I didn't hear that. What was that?
He asked if you got everything on there, or did you need a little
I had more words, but I couldn't, and I was gonna make it. I was just so damned excited that I got a slide. I didn't know what to do with myself, and so all of these things that you can do in the UI, you can do in PowerShell, and there's various reasons to do that. That's one of the maturity phases of automating these things. We had one customer or one client that we did this with, and they were doing things by hand and messing it up. So I introduced some PowerShell scripts, and then we took those PowerShell scripts and automated them with a flow and all that as we were working through the maturity model. And then it ended up being, Orchestra, I think is where we went with them. But this is another tool. If you're comfortable with PowerShell, you can do this. All of the things that you're used to doing, add, removing, getting, the site designs, which are now called site templates, but I'm going to still keep calling them site designs because I'm an old school SharePoint guy and site templates are a thing from 20 years ago. But site designs, site templates, and site scripts. So site scripts are the components. You take these little JSON blobs, make them site scripts, and then take those and add those to site designs. So it's kind of like Mark's idea of taking site designs and using them in chunks. You can do the same thing with site scripts. One of the super cool, so I guess, yes, so site scripts go into site designs and site designs are applied to a web. The other thing is the PowerShell things play fast and loose with what's a web and what's a site. It's all web, but some of the commands say site because they don't want us to think about webs anymore, but it's all really at that web level. One of the superpowers you get from PowerShell is the ability to create the JSON blob for the site script from an existing web or list. So you can go in with the UI, you can add columns to a list, you can do all the fun stuff there, or add things to a site, and then you can do the get site script from web and get that JSON blob. And then generally it's got a whole bunch of crap you don't want in it. So you fire it up on something like VS Code and pull out the stuff you don't want. But that's a really great way to make it easy to create the template, but it also is good to help you understand what the verbs are and the things you can do, and that kind of works the creative juices. All of the options or all of the examples I gave here were using the SPO module. That's Microsoft's SharePoint Online module. It does it. The PNP PowerShell module does it better, so I always just tell people to use that. So I should have used different commands here, but all that stuff works in the PNP module. And it's really easy, and it's an easy way to kind of gradually get used to these things because you can play with them.
Yeah, I think the nice part too about that get command, getting this, the script for you as a starting point, is it can make you a power user faster than if you had to try to write that JSON blob from scratch, which would be so much harder. So just basically configuring it how you think you want it, getting it, and then you can kind of read through it and it becomes obvious and you're like, oh, here's where they did this, and I know I don't want that piece, and so you just edit that out, and it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and the schema's published somewhere. I know, Mark, you had a link to it in one of the slides you used to do. So the schema for that JSON is out there. So like Julie said, you do all that, and then if you want to tweak something, you can go to the schema and look and see what values you can put in there and what other verbs and actions are in there.
And I'm pretty sure you can register the schema in Visual Studio Code so that you can you can get IntelliSense on it.
Sweet. I do all of my PowerShell in Notepad, or all my JSON in Notepad. So
yeah, of course you do. I'm shocked. Not
VI all the way. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to list and library templates. Derek, you found some neat stuff this week, didn't you?
I did. So, list and library templates have been around for a little while. Microsoft has provided us with a bunch of new templates, and they've got pretty little pictures on them. They're a way for people to create consistency across creating the same thing across multiple sites. I think this is one of those things that, Mark, as we were talking about the maturity model, these are great for organizations that need one-off solutions. So if your IT team needs to create an asset management tracker, these Microsoft provided templates are a really great thing. Or your finance team needs an expense report or a vacation request. These are really great examples of how to just get those up and running really quick. the big takeaway for this is that they're not really made for enterprise use, because once you go beyond this is only used in this site and you want to start aggregating things, then this is where that architecture falls down, because it's not using enterprise level content types. So you've got different instances of these lists sprinkled around all over the place, with no common content type. So you can't search across all of these.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, they don't even use content types.
They do not.
They do not, actually.
So it's not. It's
yeah. They do. Yeah.
It's below even.
So this is like a level 100, 150 solution, but it is repeatable.
But with prettier pictures.
With much prettier pictures. I don't know, Steve. I wouldn't say it is as bad as the Fab 40, but it's close.
Well, they don't screw up your whole farm.
They don't.
So there's that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're better from that perspective. They do stand alone. They do work. They accomplish what they do, but not in a great way.
Right.
Well, it's got that going for it, which is nice.
Yes, but the other thing we can do, so we've got the Microsoft provided templates. We also have the ability to add our own from an organizational level. And Julia, if you want to go to the next one.
Yes.
So we have the ability to create a new list or a new library from an existing list or library, right? So I'm going to save my document. I'm going to save the most recent version of that document. And that's my new template, right? So you can say, if the asset tracker or the issues list is fine, I'm going to copy it from A to B. And that works fine, but it sort of leaves a trail along the way of upgrades and changes. So as long as you're using, a definitive one, that can all be done in the UI. If you want to actually create something that you add from your organization, that you need to use PowerShell for. I knew Todd would get a kick out of that. And exactly what Todd was talking about earlier, which is you create the list or library exactly how you want it. Then you export it using PowerShell. It creates that JSON blob, and then you upload it as a new template with a name. And that's how you get it to show up in the For Your Organization tab. One thing that we discovered as a group, if you go into your list settings, you will see Save as Template in there. And that we're sort of trying to figure out why that was still there, because that's a vestige from Classic. It lets you actually save the template as an old school STP file. But I could not figure out for the life of me
somebody
what it
messed
does.
up.
I think they made a
I think
mistake.
somebody messed up because that was there, right, in on-prem, and then remember it got taken away, and everybody was like, "Oh, remember this URL hack, and we could still get save as template." And now all of a sudden it's like back, and I think somebody just accidentally turned the flag off.
I think that was save site as template.
Yeah,
They
were both gone though.
Yeah.
I thought it was both. Okay, yeah.
Somebody turned this back on and it doesn't do anything. There's still a list templates gallery, but it does not populate the from your organization library. So if you're wondering, that's why.
That's fantastic.
But the cool thing is from here, you can use enterprise IA and use enterprise level content types.
100%. So that is definitely a good way to go. All right, so when we get to enterprise level automation, we obviously have some partners out there that are friends of Sympraxis, so to speak. And so probably from a provisioning perspective, like templating, provisioning perspective, Orchestry is the creme de la creme of the vendors that can do this. There's live templating and all of that great ability to sort of template your SharePoint sites, your team sites, and all the stuff in between, adding metadata to a central list so that you can use that to sort of monitor all your sites, etc. Awesome product for that. Mark, ShareGate can also do this to a certain extent. Do you want to talk to that first?
Let me jump into
Orchestry. No, Todd. Okay, go.
So Orchestry is so good that we had that client where we were doing it with PowerShell, and they leveled up, and somebody said, instead of doing PowerShell, should we do Orchestry instead? And I couldn't even in good conscience make the argument for PowerShell That is how good Orchestra is, that I couldn't defend my beloved PowerShell. I think that says it all.
Thank God. All right, Mark, tell us about ShareGate's ability here.
So ShareGate, I think historically a lot of us have used ShareGate to just make copies of sites, and that is a way of templating, right? I mean, you just copy a site that's already out there, and you don't take the content with it. So ShareGate has done that for years and years and years, but they actually have a provisioning engine now too that looks at you can point it at a live template, you know, a site that you've built that's a template, and it will create a new site from it. So their provisioning engine is also quite good depending on what your needs are. Orchestra is more sophisticated at the moment, but I expect ShareGate will be continuing to evolve as well.
So then you sort of go from that, so a third-party SaaS product, and I'm usually hard pressed to go the next level here. And everybody knows how I like to write a bit of code here and there, but with Orchestra and or ShareGate on the table, there's very little reason why you would need to write your entire from scratch provisioning solution, especially because at least with Orchestra, and Mark, you can speak to if ShareGate has this, but Orchestra has the ability to have webhooks on the end of provisioning a site and or to trigger provisioning a site with one or more templates. And so with that ability, I find that I can put any extra custom stuff that I need into a webhook that can get triggered at the end of the provisioning process or do it before I start the provisioning process. But if you wanted to, obviously, the PMP Core SDK, which is the modern replacement for the PMP Framework SDK, which is the .NET Core and /.NET Standard SDK for building that, has all the provisioning features as part of it. And so I believe Orchestra, at least in part, uses some of the provisioning features that are in PMP Core. And so, you know, obviously this is the de facto standard for how to do the provisioning by utilizing the REST APIs that Microsoft enables for doing this type of work. So there's that. So you can use those. And obviously, you could just write code from scratch using the REST APIs and orchestrate creating things. Now, I will say that oftentimes, and probably because I work on the PMP.js library, this is a thing, but I'll often be like, oh, hey, I need to go create 20 different lists with this content type in these fields. And I often will just write that in the console with PMP.js. So, you know, there's that too, but it's another way to automate. And of course, there's the Microsoft CLI and PowerShell to do some of that, as we've talked about before. So we've sort of come full circle on all the different ways that you can templatize and provision these different pieces. So moving on, we have a lot of resources this time. Mark's blog on the his issue with the new names for the pages.
I've got no issues.
Yeah, you do. You got lots of issues. A link back to our template overview episode, and we're going to do more to sort of put together a playlist of all the template issues, etc. And a link for the Policy Center creation with PMP Modern Search and Provisioning Engine link and the PMP Core SDK, and also links to our partners Orchestra and ShareGate are in there. Okay, last but not least, what we're doing next. So February 21st, we've extended our templating journey. You thought we were done. We are not. We're going to take on Teams templates in our next episode on February 21st. And then, of course, see us live. We've got the North American Cloud and Collaboration Summit coming up in April. I am going to be there for that. The Microsoft 365 Community Conference. That's going to be Derek and myself presenting there. So definitely join us or come say hi if you're going to be there. We will be at the European Collaboration Summit as well. That again will be Derek and myself. And then TechCon 365 is Derek out in Seattle in June. So we are ramping up for the conference season full blast. And so we would love to say hi or see anyone. And so great to hear from everybody. Great to have you here today. Please join us again for our next episode when we talk about Teams templates on February 21st. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask and Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.